I survived firefights overseas and disasters on the job, but nothing prepared me for the heartbreak that came in a single email from the woman I loved. I pulled a cold beer from the old fridge in the small place I shared with my buddy Jake Carter. We were both paramedics, although Jake was still clocking in while I'd just finished my last shift. Laid off. Last one hired, first one out. It's how it goes sometimes. So there I was, sitting alone on a Saturday night, beer in hand, just feeling kind of lost. Trying to figure out my next steps and, if I'm honest, a little sorry for myself. The captain had been decent about it, told me he hated to do it, but with the budget cuts there wasn't much choice. Before all this, I'd served in Afghanistan with an infantry unit. That's where all that hard training came into play. I think it was Chesty Puller, the Marine legend, who once said, "The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war." Couldn't be more accurate. I found out real fast that I loved the job. The danger, the chaos. I became hooked on the adrenaline. Compared to being under fire, working wrecks and emergencies as a paramedic almost felt tame. What made it even better was being out there with other young guys like me, all of us figuring it out together. Highway 82 cut across the east side of town, and that stretch fell under Brian's watch. He was my supervisor back then. It was a high-pressure area, non-stop calls and always something going sideways. But the job came with its share of complications too, like walking away from the town where I'd been born and raised. Even after being gone nearly 5 years, it didn't take long to feel connected again. The rhythms of the place, the people, it all came back fast. Funny thing is, if I hadn't gotten injured, I probably never would have returned. But like John Lennon said, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. Then came that moment that turned everything upside down. I froze. Couldn't even explain why. Just one of those gut punches. "Sophia, that doesn't make any sense," I told her, trying not to let my voice rise. I could feel the tension building. And then she said it, the word every guy hates to hear from the woman he loves. Fine. Just that one word, soft and sharp at the same time. She gave me a quick kiss on the lips right there in her parents' driveway. The wind picked up and out of nowhere I felt cold all over. She climbed into her car. I saw the tears in her eyes even though she wouldn't look at me. She pulled away, wiping at her face as she went. And I just stood there like a fool watching it all fall apart. I came out of the barn not long after that, having tucked my things away in the tack room. But something about that night, that moment, it never left me. Our place sat out on the edge of town, where each property stretched across several acres. The houses were set way back from the road, and most had these long gravel driveways that led up to simple ranch-style homes. Just about every yard had a barn or a big shed tucked behind it. The folks who owned our house before us had kept horses, so they built a decent-sized barn. We never kept animals though. Mostly we used it for storing old furniture, tools, and the kind of stuff you never really throw away. We moved in when I was 8. That barn became a sort of sanctuary for me over the years, a place I could escape to when I needed space to think or just breathe. I remember telling Emily once, with my whole heart, "She's the one. I want to build a life with her." Emily gave me that look, soft but a little cautious. "Ryan," she said gently, "we all know couples who've fallen apart when one of them heads off to college. Most of the time, being apart doesn't make things stronger." And deep down I knew she was right. But even back then at 18 I couldn't picture a life that didn't include Sophia. We had this history, this deep friendship that had grown into something more. I was convinced we were it for each other. And I truly believed she felt the same way. Yeah, life is unpredictable. I wasn't naive to that. But I always thought we'd face whatever came, together. One night I was sitting with someone who had just gone through a rough breakup. "You want to talk about it?" I asked gently. There was a long pause. Then came the quiet words, "She dumped me." He repeated it like he was still trying to believe it himself. "Ryan," Max said over the phone later that night, "I'm heading over now." "You at the bar?" I asked. "Yeah." "All right. Hand your keys to the bartender. I want to talk to him for a second." Max sounded a little distracted. "Hold on. Kinda tied up right now." After a short pause, I heard a new voice come through the line. "You the bartender?" "One of them." "You get the keys from my buddy?" "Yep, got him." "Appreciate it. I'm on my way to pick him up." That's how it went with Max and me. We looked out for each other. We'd been solid roommates. Neither of us was the party-all-night type. We preferred quiet stuff, long runs, scaling cliffs, that sort of thing. Max had this thing for flying. He was a licensed glider pilot, and he found peace up there in the silent sky. After I came back from Afghanistan, worn down, recovering at Bethesda, he made sure I had a spot waiting for me at the firehouse. I told him I might not stick around long. He just chuckled and said, Then just stay until it doesn't feel like staying anymore. I've missed Max lately. We barely heard from him after he finished training. He'd been deployed with the Marines to some island in the middle of nowhere. A few months after that, we got a postcard from him. The words he wrote were upbeat, light-hearted even, but the picture told another story. There was something in his eyes that didn't match the smile on his face. There was a photo that stuck with me. Max leaning back against a sun-baked mud brick wall, fully geared up in his combat fatigues, though he wasn't wearing his helmet. He had a compact submachine gun resting in his arms, one he later told me was British-made. The light hit him just right, throwing shadows across his face. He was smiling in the photo, but his eyes told a different story. I'd seen that look before at Terry's funeral. A kind of heaviness you don't shake off easily. Later that evening, I decided to check my email, more out of habit than anything. I'd been looking forward to talking with Sophia over the holidays, hoping we might patch things up, maybe even find our way back to where we were. But as soon as I saw her name in the inbox, something didn't feel right. A kind of quiet dread settled in my chest. I opened the message, and as I read, the words blurred. My eyes welled up. Dear Ryan, I'm not sure how to say this, so I'll just be honest. I've fallen in love with someone I met here in Austin. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I thought what we had was love, but this feels real. I sat there stunned. The silence around me felt deafening. My mom came into the room and noticed right away that something was off. I handed her the laptop without saying a word. She read the message, and when she looked up, there were tears in her eyes too. I'm so sorry, Ryan, she whispered, pulling me into one of those long motherly hugs that you don't realize you need until you're in it. That girl, she doesn't know what she's lost. Truly, she doesn't. She sat with me while I quietly ate the soup she'd made earlier, just being there, not saying much. Then after a bit, she leaned back and asked, So, do you want to talk to her? Or should I make sure she stays far away if she ever shows up at our door? There was a flicker of fierce protectiveness in her eyes. Classic mom. I didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to shut the door completely. But another part wasn't ready to let go, even though I should have. At that point in my life, I'd started thinking about what came next. I was living in Stillwater, and I'd been looking at nursing school pretty seriously. I knew I needed to finish my degree, but more than anything, I felt ready for a change. I wanted to spread my wings a little, maybe even get out of Oklahoma entirely. So I started applying for paramedic jobs in different places. If I found something that felt right, I figured I'd work for a year or two, get some real-world experience, and maybe go back to school down the line. I never imagined I'd end up back in Tala. But at the time, I needed distance from everything and everyone. Thing is, with a nursing degree you can go just about anywhere, I told her one evening. I know, Ryan, she said. But this place, this is my home. Always has been. Like Dorothy said, there's no place like it. I smiled because that was Mom, sentimental and stubborn all at once. Well, I said, no matter where I land, you've got a place to visit. And I'll be home when it matters, your birthdays, holidays, your grandkids being born. She laughed at that, but I meant it. She smiled through her tears and wiped them away with the back of her hand. Well, I've got to find a husband first, she said with a soft laugh. He's out there, I replied, grinning. Probably just waiting on the right moment to stumble into your life. We both chuckled, and for a little while the weight on my chest felt a bit lighter. Months passed, and I ended up at Camp Pendleton for training. We'd just gotten back from a grueling 3-day field exercise when I stopped by the mailroom to grab my things. There, among the usual junk and military notices, was a letter with a return address out of Austin. It had been forwarded from Great Lakes, just barely missing me there. For a moment I thought about tossing it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the envelope. It was from Sophia. Dear Ryan, this is one of the hardest letters I've ever had to write. I didn't even finish the first few lines before my stomach turned. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket, unsure if I even wanted to know what else she had to say. Not long after, I had a little run-in that brought some much-needed comic relief. I was sitting in the ward, still recovering, when a young nurse, clipboard in hand, approached me with that no-nonsense look. Her accent was pure Oklahoma country, and she handed me a few sheets of paper to review. Well, ma'am, I said in my best rural drawl, scanning the top of the form. This here don't seem to have anything to do with me. What do you mean? She asked, confused. Ma'am, I hate to disappoint, but I'm a sailor, not a Marine. And I don't see one word here about sailors. Nurse Jenkins, standing nearby, had to cover her mouth to stifle a laugh. I thought the psych nurse might blow a gasket, but she spun on her heel and stormed out. Jenkins gave me a playful scolding afterward for stirring the pot, but I think even she appreciated the break in routine. A few weeks later, someone brought Sophia up again. I was sitting outside watching the clouds roll across the summer sky, when a friend said quietly, "Ryan, she still loves you. She knows she messed up, especially with that Alan guy, but she's back now. Teaching. Trying to make things right. She's not the same person anymore." I didn't respond right away. I just kept staring at those big puffy clouds like they might hold an answer. Finally I said, "I don't know." It wasn't long after that when the Navy released me from the hospital and formally discharged me. It hit me harder than I expected. Part of me still felt like I had more to give, more to prove. But they said I was done, so that was that. Back home things looked the same, but they felt different. One afternoon I ran into Emily. She was still in her scrubs, coming off a long shift. I was dressed in my usual, white shirt, dark pants, the uniform of a paramedic. She looked at me half amused, half exasperated. "Ryan," she said, shaking her head, "you've got to see it. Betty's not the one. She goes through guys faster than a box of tissues." I laughed, but I knew she was right. Deep down I knew. "She'll toss you aside just like every other guy around here who thought they were special," Emily said, her voice sharp with concern. I gave her a half smile. "Emily, with all due respect, my love life isn't exactly your territory. Betty and I are grown adults who enjoy each other's company, that's all." Truth be told, I wasn't fooling myself, or her. But I didn't have the energy to explain the full story right then. I'd never really been into the group run some of the others organized. That pack mentality, the chest-thumping conversations, I just wasn't interested. Running, for me, was about clearing my head. It was time I used to think things through, put the pieces back in place, and sometimes even find a little peace. If Sophia wanted to come along, I didn't object. It's a free country, or close to it anyway. She had no problem keeping up. She was clearly used to the pace, didn't complain, didn't fall behind. We ran in silence that morning, our breaths turning to mist in the crisp dawn air. The world slowly lit up around us, and even though no words were spoken, there was something honest about that moment. Eventually we sat down and talked. She nodded as I laid things out. No anger, no drama. Just a quiet understanding. We decided to give it another try, but it wasn't some big romantic reunion. There were no fireworks, no grand gestures. Honestly, I think I wanted those things, but something in me held back. Maybe it was self-preservation. Maybe it was doubt. Sophia, to her credit, didn't rush me. She was patient, even though she had to live with the knowledge that I was still seeing Betty now and then. It wasn't ideal. It was messy. But for a little while that's how things were. Betty, sharp as ever, caught on fast. After one of our nights together, she looked at me, soft, not angry, and said what we were both already thinking. I had believed we were above all that mess. That we could keep things light and easy. But the truth is, we were human, and it got complicated fast. Later that night, I found myself driving through the cold drizzle, heading toward Mike's Roadhouse. I was angry, confused, and just needed to be anywhere but alone. The rain had eased up, but the wind was still biting. The parking lot was jammed, so I pulled into a spot way in the back. I threw on my barn coat, tugged it tight, and clutched my hat against the wind as I stepped through the puddles toward the entrance. Inside, the hum of country music and clinking glasses greeted me, warm and familiar. Then I heard it, a laugh that hit me like a gut punch. It wasn't exactly Sophia's, but it was close enough. The kind of laugh she used to have after a few drinks, loose and carefree. That sound froze me in place. And just like that, I was right back in the thick of it. I turned my head and spotted her, Sophia, stepping out from the direction of the restroom, walking alongside her old college roommate, Tricia. My heart sank. She looked different. She was wearing a short denim skirt that barely hit mid-thigh, cowboy boots, and a snug white tank top. My stomach twisted. What were they doing here? I watched her for a moment as she slid something into her purse. A glimpse of a white strap told me everything I didn't want to know. My chest tightened and I turned away, suddenly overwhelmed by the noise, the people, the laughter that felt like mockery. Later that night, I drove through the steady drizzle, the wind still biting through my coat. I kept my eyes on the road and my mind locked on the plan: get to California. Start fresh. New job. New city. A clean slate. In my gut, I knew I never should have come back to Tala. That place, those memories, were a trap I'd willingly walked into. The next morning, the shrill whine of a hairdryer cut through Sophia's restless sleep like a buzzsaw. She groaned, dragging herself out of unconsciousness only to be met with the punishing grip of a full-blown hangover. Her head throbbed, her limbs refused to cooperate, and the ache in her body felt like a protest against every bad decision she'd made the night before. She sat up slowly, only to realize she was still in the same clothes from the night before. A wave of nausea and shame washed over her. What had possessed her to drink that much? Why had she gone out at all? She stumbled toward the bathroom but couldn't bear the sound of the hairdryer. It was too much. Everything was too much. She looked at herself in the mirror and could barely meet her own gaze. All she could see was regret. It wasn't until she was in the cab of Kirk's truck the night before, when he leaned in, made his intentions crystal clear, that she'd snapped out of it. What was she thinking? What had she expected to happen in some dark parking lot with a man like that? She was lucky Kirk hadn't pushed harder. He settled for a kiss, and for that she was grateful. Still, the moment haunted her. Even as she tried to refocus on Ryan, on the relationship they were trying to rebuild, there were questions she couldn't shake. Why did she still feel so unsure? She had told him over and over again that she loved him. She'd laid her heart bare. So why did it feel like he was holding back? Was it because he didn't love her the same way anymore? Or was he just afraid that letting her in again meant risking everything? That thought made her angry. She had fought so hard for them, tried to prove herself. Why couldn't he see that? But anger quickly gave way to shame. She thought back to the night before. Maybe Ryan did know her better than she knew herself. Maybe the fear he carried wasn't just his, it was a reflection of her own. And in that moment she didn't know which hurt more, the distance between them, or the part of her that wondered if she deserved it. She sat on the edge of her bed, watching the daylight slowly give way to dusk. Tears began to slip down her cheeks, quiet and uninvited. The weight of regret pressed down harder with every passing minute. She needed to see Ryan, needed to apologize. But deep down she knew she couldn't be completely honest. What happened the night before, she couldn't bring herself to share all of it. After another long shower, she stood in front of her closet, torn over what to wear. Nothing seemed right. Everything either felt too much or not enough. Eventually, she reached for a pair of jeans and a navy blue sweater, the one Ryan had given her the Christmas before last. The weather had cooled, but the skies were dry, so she slipped on her heels, giving herself one last look in the mirror before heading out. Before walking out the door, she checked her phone. There were several missed messages. Some from earlier in the day. Others from friends checking in, maybe sensing something was off. But none from Ryan. And that hurt more than she expected. Maybe he really did know her better than she knew herself. Was she truly incapable of being faithful? Or just incapable of staying faithful to him? No, she told herself firmly. I love him. I've always loved him. Even back when she had that short-lived, foolish fling with Alan during college, she'd known it wasn't real. Alan had the charm, the confidence, and the kind of money that made things feel exciting, but it was all surface level. It wasn't love. Looking back now, she saw that clearly. What she had with Ryan, that had always been something deeper. Later, in a quiet corner booth of a local diner, Kathy sat across from her, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee. I asked him how you reacted to the news, Kathy said gently, stirring her drink without looking up. He told me he hadn't heard from you all weekend. Said you were in Tulsa, getting some kind of teaching award. Sophia stared into her own mug, silent for a long time. Did you know any of this was happening? Kathy asked again, more softly this time. Sophia finally spoke, her voice tight and tired. Ryan and I had an argument Friday before I left. I wanted him to come with me to Tulsa, to be there for the award. But he said he had to stay and deal with something at the station. I left angry. Nearby, Max sat at the counter, quietly finishing off a plate of cold eggs and hash browns. Bess, a slim redhead who worked the morning shift at Tony's, came over with the coffee pot. Need a refill, Max? She asked, already reaching for his cup. He nodded. Yeah, thanks. She glanced toward Sophia. Anything for you, hon? Sophia shook her head. No, I'm okay. Bess picked up the plate and looked at the mostly untouched food in front of Sophia. Sam's not used to plates coming back full, she said gently. Everything all right with breakfast this morning? Sophia gave a half smile but didn't answer. There wasn't really anything to say. Sophia had always known that most women in town had a thing for Max. He had that quiet, rugged charm that didn't need much help turning heads. Bess was no exception. Sophia caught her glancing at him more than once from the corner of her eye. Later that week, Sophia stood quietly in the church vestibule, waiting with the other bridesmaids for their cue. The murmurs from the congregation faded into soft organ music as the ceremony began. Halfway through the piece, the doors opened. Emily appeared on the arm of her father, stepping onto the aisle lined with soft rose petals. She looked absolutely radiant. Her dress was a sleek, sleeveless ivory silk that hugged her in all the right places. Elegant, simple, and perfect. Sophia's chest swelled with pride. Emily had been more than a best friend, she'd been a sister in every way that counted. And she'd loved Max for what seemed like forever, even if she never made it obvious. Watching them now, seeing it all finally come together, felt like something out of a dream. Max stood at the altar, looking a little stiff in his tux, but his eyes softened the second he saw Emily. Sophia caught herself smiling. Later at the reception, she found herself seated next to Lily, a new teacher who had recently moved to town. Sophia braced herself for the inevitable small talk, expecting the conversation to shift to her and Ryan. But Lily surprised her. "You've known Ryan a long time, haven't you?" she asked gently. Sophia nodded. "Since I was 13. He's always been someone special." Lily smiled thoughtfully. "He really is. I've only been here a few months, but I've seen the way people look up to him. He's well respected. And well," she let out a soft laugh, "have you noticed how many women in this town are watching him?" Sophia gave a tight-lipped smile, unsure what to say. Lily paused, then leaned in a little. "There was this one meeting at the community center a while back. I don't even remember what it was about. But I do remember sitting across from Ryan and realizing I wasn't hearing a word being said." She laughed again, this time with a little embarrassment. "All I could think about was what it would be like to get him alone. We hardly even knew each other, but I felt jealous." "Isn't that ridiculous?" "Jealous?" Sophia echoed, caught off guard. Lily nodded, her expression softening as a memory flickered behind her eyes. "There was this Navy nurse there too, sweet, pretty, clearly interested in him. I remember thinking, back off, sister." Sophia listened silently, letting Lily's words settle in. "We both had to leave before the meeting ended," Lily continued, her voice distant now, "but he told me he'd call. And he did. That's another thing about Ryan. When he says he'll do something, he means it. That kind of consistency? That's rare. It's one of the reasons I started falling for him." Sophia flinched slightly. That familiar ache crept into her chest, the kind that always came when someone reminded her of just how solid, how dependable Ryan had always been. It used to make her heart race. Now it made her wonder if she'd ever deserved it. "And sure enough, he called that very night," Lily said, her voice light, full of that new love kind of warmth. "Our schedules didn't exactly line up though, so we couldn't meet up for a whole week. I was climbing the walls," she laughed, glancing down with a sheepish grin. "Honestly, I was ready to just drag him off somewhere and have him all to myself." Sophia managed a smile. It was genuine, at least partly. She was happy for Lily, or at least wanted to be. But then she glanced over at Ryan. He stood beside her, his arm casually looped through hers, yet his eyes weren't on her. They were on Lily. Sophia followed his gaze and caught the moment when Lily's eyes met hers. It was quiet, but it said everything. In that single glance, Lily seemed to understand what Sophia had tried so hard to keep hidden in the dark the night before. Now, under the clear light of day, nothing could be disguised. Sophia's heart clenched. She blinked fast, willing herself not to cry as they reached the wide vestibule of the church. She nudged Emily and Max toward the stairway, buying herself a little space. Then she and Ryan stepped outside into the still air. In the weeks that followed, Sophia withdrew from just about everything. She turned down invitations, skipped out on gatherings. Her shopping trips happened late at night when she could move through the aisles unnoticed. She didn't want the questions, the looks, or the pity. There was only one time she reached out to Ryan again, and that was nearly a month after he'd left. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, heart pounding. Finally she called. "Ryan? It's Sophia," she said, voice trembling. "Please don't hang up." His reply came evenly, calm as always. "Sophia, I'm not going to hang up. How are you?" She could hear something different in his voice, something quieter, more distant. A tone that told her without saying it directly, he'd moved on. "I've been better," she said softly. Far from Oklahoma, on a calm sea under a bright afternoon sun, Lily gripped the wheel of the sailboat with a kind of freedom she hadn't felt in years. The breeze was steady, filling the sails and carrying them toward Santa Cruz Island, about 20 miles out. It was just past noon, and the water in the Santa Barbara Channel shimmered under the sky. They had left the Santa Barbara Marina after a quiet overnight stay and were now 3 days into what had been, for Lily, a perfect vacation. She stood steady at the helm, savoring the salt on her lips and the wind tugging at her hair, completely in her element. Sailing wasn't new to her. She'd spent much of her teenage years down at local marinas, learning every line and knot, mastering the art of reading the wind and waves. It felt natural to be back out here. But even in all that beauty, with the ocean stretching out in every direction, part of her mind kept drifting back to land, and to Ryan. Back in high school and through her college years, Lily had hustled through all kinds of harbor jobs, hauling gear, cleaning docks, even working the rental counters, just to earn enough to spend time on the water. Those long hours paid off. She learned what it took to handle a sailboat, to read the wind and keep the vessel steady and on course. By the time she hit her 20s, she was completely at home aboard boats in the 30-foot range. She'd cruised up and down the California coast and even made a few longer trips into Mexican waters. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a part of who she was. As they passed beyond the breakwater, leaving the marina behind, Lily glanced up at the sleek lines of the sailboat they were on now. It was stunning, bigger, more luxurious than anything she'd ever captained. She found herself wondering how Clara, her travel companion, had come to own such a magnificent boat. There had to be a story there. Out on the open water, Lily's thoughts drifted. She thought of Clara's life, busy, demanding, and so full of pressure. She couldn't imagine how Clara balanced it all, especially raising her daughter, Emma. But from everything Lily had seen, Clara's support system had made all the difference. Not just in the logistics but emotionally too. And then there was Ryan. Meeting him had flipped everything on its head. The connection she felt with him was deeper than anything she'd ever shared with Greg, her ex. It wasn't just stronger, it was something entirely different. With Greg, things had been stable, logical, predictable. But with Ryan, it was emotional, almost disorienting. He brought something out of her that she hadn't realized was even missing. For the first time in her life, Lily, analytical, composed, a woman who thrived under pressure, felt vulnerable. Not in a weak way but in a raw, unguarded way. She wasn't used to that, and it scared her a little. But she also couldn't fight it. In her heart, she already belonged to him. And she knew, without needing to hear it, that he felt the same. Even the way he looked at her said everything. There was admiration in his eyes that made her blush and feel bold all at once. That night, after one of their first truly intimate moments, she had borrowed one of his shirts, crisp, white, with the sleeves rolled up and only the middle few buttons fastened. It fell to her knees, and she remembered how he watched her wear it like it was the most natural thing in the world. That shirt stayed with her long after that night. Long before there were rings or vows, there was that memory, a soft shirt, a quiet morning, and the feeling that she'd found her place in someone else's life. That shirt still smelled like him. No matter how many times she washed it, that scent lingered, faint but familiar. It made her feel close to him even when he wasn't around. Over time, she'd added a couple more of his shirts to her closet. She told herself it was just for comfort. Truthfully, she just couldn't bear to give them back. The sailboat rocked gently beneath them as laughter filled the deck. Someone cracked a joke about Clara messing around with the first mate, and everyone burst out laughing. Clara gave a knowing look, eyes twinkling with mischief, clearly ready to take the wheel if given half a chance. Lily laughed too. Maybe in a bit, she said, pressing back against Ryan. He can't really move at the moment. Ryan chuckled, wrapping his arms around her waist. Hey, two can play at that game, he said with a grin, brushing his lips against her neck. She squirmed, giggling. Stop, you're going to get us thrown overboard. Clara smirked from across the deck. Oh, please look who's talking. Weren't you the one who had to drag Elliot down below an hour ago when he got a little too friendly? Everyone laughed again. It was easy, natural. That kind of camaraderie you can only find when everyone's relaxed and the wind is working in your favor. Later, someone brought up Clara's ex, and a few folks mentioned how sorry they were to see her leave that relationship. Lily raised an eyebrow. Doesn't change my opinion. The guy was still a fool for letting her go. Ryan nodded. Agreed. But I guess, she added with a shrug, he earned back a couple points for ending up with a surgeon. Ryan leaned in, grinning. Still not as beautiful as you, though? She laughed and playfully nudged him. Don't tempt me to ask for a comparison. I won't show you a picture, he said with a wink, wrapping her up in a hug. Then Lily gave him a look, half teasing, half thoughtful. Speaking of farewells, weren't we at one just last week? Felt more like a funeral than a going-away party. Ryan laughed. Well, you know me. I don't exactly do light-hearted goodbyes.